Kofi Annan said, "If tolerance, respect, and equity permeate family life, they will translate into values that shape societies, nations, and the world." It is a commonly accepted fact that in Australia today, being of a mixed background would not lead to exclusion and prejudice treatment. Extending on this, you would never think that being of a mixed ethnicity would result in the removal of children from the loving care of their mother. This was not always the case, as was experienced within my family history. My mother, Patricia Osborne, an Australian Aboriginal Maltese Irish woman, has shared with me the disheartening experiences that her family was subject to due to their mixed ethnicity. Reflection on the experiences discussed by my mother, I feel it is important to understand what life was like for a woman of mixed ethnicity in the early to mid-20th century Australia. My mother's family originated in the township of Mackay, which was discovered at the beginning of the 20th century. Mackay underwent many changes that saw it transform from a land home to over 2,000 Australian Aboriginal people to an agricultural hub harvested of its natural resources. The decade of the 30s, in which Claire Muscat was born, was a time of industrial and agricultural development, as the Mackay Harbour was developed to provide a dock for transportation of goods via sea. During this time, many of the families described as pioneers relied on farming to secure a stable economic position. The main resources that came out of the Mackay region at this time were sugar and cattle, as the township worked to get the environment stable for other crops. Other sources of income included various labour positions such as wharf labourer, drover and miller. On the 13th of January 1935, my grandmother Claire was one of the 7 children born to Lucy and Joseph Muscat in the township of Mackay. She went through many trials with her brothers and sisters, including being sent to an orphanage with them when their father Joseph Muscat became ill with Huntington's chorea and died. Built in 1885 to home children transferred from St. Joseph's Orphanage, St. Joseph's Home was also known as Neocol or Meteor Park and was run by the Sisters of Mercy. Through conversations that my mother, Patricia, has had with her uncle, it was the goal of the orphanage to ensure all children were domesticated to Anglo-European standards. Harsh physical abuse was used as a means of enforcing desired behaviour and establishing routine among the children. When the girls of the orphanage became women, they would leave to enter roles as housemaids, wives, and various other domestic positions. The hidden Aboriginal ethnicity of Claire Muscat was acknowledged in the birth certificate of her mother, Lucy Ryle. Due to the cruel experiences of racism that her grandmother and mother had, Claire was not comfortable with owning her identity. Claire had directly experienced racism in her childhood when she was removed from her biological mother. Discussions with my mother, Patricia, have revealed that this resulted in a focus on hiding her Aboriginality from the outside world, and so the Aboriginal identity of my grandmother Claire was stolen from her. A devastating revelation of the extent to which racial prejudice impacted on the treatment of persons of a mixed ethnicity was when my mother was told by her uncle that his grandmother Clara was brought to serve as a housemaid to an Anglo-pioneering family. This was suggested to be a common occurrence that people of Australian Aboriginal descent were seen for their value in labour, a stereotype not applied to those of high and middle-class white Australian society. Another area in which being of mixed ethnicity had resulted in challenging treatment for my grandmother was when Claire became ill with Huntington's chorea. The disease was common among people of Maltese descent. Passed down through genetics, Huntington's chorea more often than not ensured death within its victims due to the absence of medical understanding and treatment. The disease leads to the death of brain cells over time that results in symptoms starting from issues with mental ability and mood, but then leading to severely unstable gait and coordination. The manifestation of this disease within my family saw my grandmother Claire receive more abuse at the hands of her husband, Darcy Osborne. Darcy, an Irish boxer and wharfie, had no experience or understanding of this disease, attributing the behaviour to female hysteria. Not having any idea of the severity of the illness or the care that was needed, Darcy resorted to beating Claire and throwing cold water on her when the illness was taking hold of her. Despite the crippling effect of this disease, Claire was expected to engage in all domestic tasks, such as starting the house fire, preparing breakfast, and caring for her 5 children. Regardless of the severity of her illness, Claire would still bear 2 more children to Darcy, after which she would then be relocated to the empty house of Darcy's mother at Mount Gordon, away from her children and any trace of humanity. Left in this house, my grandmother Claire one day disappeared, and her bones were later found buried in a shallow grave on the beach near the house that Darcy had banished her to. living such a life of mistreatment and exclusion due to preconceived ideas of negative difference occurring from the colour of one's skin. I wonder if she ever knew what it was like to be truly loved as a member of a family.